Okay, announcements before we start. I have the labs. I have your lab one if you have not collected it yet. And this is loud. And I will give it to you after class if you can catch me in the hall. There will be a section meeting tomorrow as scheduled, but office hours will be in Sacramento. Okay, so come to the section if you're in town. If you happen to be in front of the Capitol waving a sign, you can find me there for office hours. Okay. Let me turn off some lights here. So if we could let's pick up where we left off, roughly speaking. This week we're devoting to the run-up to the Civil War, which we're including essentially the 1830s. So it's 1830s, 40s, and 50s. We're talking about nativism and anti-Catholicism, which are more or less the same thing. We're talking about the big picture, which is how this anti-Catholicism and nativism get pushed off the agenda in favor of slavery, just as the country really heats up in anticipation of the Civil War. But prior to that, the nativism is a huge issue brought about, of course, by the influx of Irish, mainly, also Germans, but mainly Irish and mainly Catholics. So we're going to talk a lot about the characteristics and the sources of this anti-Catholicism. Last time we talked in sort of general terms about the fears that fed into it. This time I'm going to talk more about the events that came out of it. So this is more of an event than an idea lecture. Nonetheless, I'm going to start with an idea, which is our friend Samuel Morse, whom we read for today, I'm sure, and passed a very difficult exam. Actually, let's start with that. What was Morse afraid of? Yes? Great. Catholics I would have taken on that exam. But you're absolutely right. It is Catholics, and it's also the linking of Catholicism in his mind with monarchism, right? What other things? Other things I would have taken? How about Austrians? He's afraid of Austrians too, right? Are there other things? I mean, in some sense, there's a lot of overlap. But Morse is definitely... Yes, Ross? He was very decidedly not afraid of Protestant immigrants. So, and I think that's an important point. He's passes definitely for nativist. He's leading the nativist parade here. But Protestant immigrants are not a problem for him. It is Catholic immigrants. And I think that's that's important. We probably give you half a point, though, because of the taking over government part. We'll see. This little quiz is not counting for very much. Don't lose anything for it, okay? But I'd like us now to consider, where does Morse fit on in this matrix? This is the one we saw before about the Democratic Republicans, right, and the Federalists, and how they fit across this kind of 2x2 matrix, right? Now, we've moved on a little. This is the 1790s, and we're really talking now about 1830s. So these political parties have actually changed, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how they've changed in a moment. But this is still a reasonable framework, and I think we should look at. So where do you think Morse fits? Who will hazard a guess? There are only 4 possibilities. Yes? Keep it on top right. A classical Republican of Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so that would be yes to the rights of immigrants, but fewer immigrants. What are some of the reasons that strikes you? Mm-hmm.
I think that the immigrants that you will allow would be Protestant immigrants, and you want them to have more rights.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're right. There really are. He cites Jefferson several times, right? He's definitely a Jeffersonian in a sense, and that's kind of interesting. So we're going to talk a second about what happens to the political parties. But at least from the piece we read, I mean, it's not like he's saying, send us more Protestant immigrants, we need more Protestant immigrants. He's just not really mentioning them. He's really all uptight about these Catholics. I think, well, who else? What other squares might he fit into? There are only 3 left. We can make a case for one of the other squares. Is that a hand raise? Anyone else want to take a stab at another square? Yes? Yeah. I see a hand up, right? Oh, you're just taking out your iPhone? All right. Yeah, right. Turn off the music. I get it. Okay. Yes? Sorry. Yeah. So the Agrippa square. I think in your case is that immigrants are immigrants. Catholics are always Catholics. They're never going to accept our values. That's the story. And that's kind of Agrippa-like. Now, Agrippa, he was talking about, we wouldn't all want to be like Pennsylvania. Look what happens when you take immigrants. Morse isn't exactly saying that. He's not really specific about places that have acceptance. So it's not an exact parallel with Agrippa, but certainly that's a good case to make. He's not. He seems rather extreme, doesn't he? He seems like he would be pretty happy if there were no more immigrants. Right? Okay. I think those are good arguments. I don't want to force us to consider all of them. It's always kind of a compromise. And you've read only one small piece of it. And, I think you could make a case that he fits in either of these squares. But I think this is the closer one. It's actually the Alexander Hamilton square. Because what's missing from the piece is a call for excluding immigrants entirely. And that's an interesting point. The nativists at this point are not calling for fewer immigrants. What the argument that they're going to be making, and Morse and I could have cited Lyman Beecher, we'll talk about a little bit later too, many other ones that know nothing, so we'll see. What they want is much longer periods of waiting before naturalization, and they want to bar immigrants from holding office. The nation is still viewed as underpopulated. They are still worried about, while we're worried about having Catholics inside the country, we're very worried also about Catholics worried about England on the northern border in the form of Canada, worried about Spain in the form of Mexico, and they're worried also about France. So there's a lot of concern at this time about what lies beyond the nation's borders, and it is pretty much universally viewed that we need to fill them up. So these people, we're right in calling them nativists, but we need to keep in mind that they're not calling for reduced immigration in the 1830s. But they are not very shy at all about calling for reduction of the rights of at least certain immigrants. Right? There's a great deal of fear in xenophobia. Let me turn now to this is the second party system. As I told you, this framework that we were looking at here refers to our 1790, a first party system. But by 1830s, the the first party system has morphed into the second party system. And a few things have happened. There's a different kind of alignment. It's nice to understand this when we want to talk about the various riots and things that happen. The Federalists self-destruct in the aftermath or during the War of 1812. They have a convention in Hartford where they essentially call for secession because they're very angry about the way the War of 1812 is quite disastrously handled. It's especially disastrous for northeastern industry. So that's a terrible strategy for a national party. If you think about it for just a second. Secession, calling for secession, a real bad idea. And the Federalists are a dead letter by 1815. That leaves the United States with really effectively one party. That's the Democratic Republicans. But by 1824, a very nasty election ensues. The Democratic Republicans, they're the only party, but they can't agree on a nominee, so they run 4 candidates, 2 of whom are Henry Clay and Andrew Jackson. Clay and Jackson both lose, but Clay loses big. Jackson loses the way Al Gore lost. He lost by winning. He got more votes than John Quincy Adams, who eventually wins. But at this time, if you don't get a majority in the Electoral College, it's thrown into the House of Representatives, which Clay was the Speaker of. And so what happened was known as a corrupt bargain. And John Quincy Adams wound up becoming president. But there was a lot of bad blood right from there. And as would be indicated by the fact that the Democratic Republicans could not run a single candidate, there was a division. The War of 1812 had, in fact, created the kind of division. It had shown that, at least to some Democrats, that Thomas Jefferson's vision of an agrarian democracy from sea to sea was not going to work. In fact, we were going to have some banks and industry, if nothing else, in order to support a respectable military. That's the side that Clay takes. So Clay, who founds his party in 1833 and calls it the Whigs, which is a reference to the Whig Party in England, which is the party that is associated with against the king. Andrew Jackson, who was finally president by 1828, is called King Andrew. Right? So that's the origin of that term. So the Whigs inherit some ideas from the Federalists. They're the party of economic growth and opportunity. That's very much a Federalist idea. You can see Alexander Hamilton in that, right? Manufacturers. They're also influenced, however, by other things that happened. And this moderate Protestant values, and I put moderate in quotes here because they're not exactly the same as what we consider moderate Protestant values today. A moderate Protestant value is, what most important thing about it is that, remember we talked about the Second Great Awakening and how Protestantism is the driving force behind abolitionism. Well, moderate Protestants are okay with slavery. They don't love it, but a moderate Protestant is not an abolitionist, at least not in this usage. And Whigs do not have to be abolitionists. There are abolitionists within the Whig Party. There are also defenders of slavery. There are a lot of, actually, quite a wide spectrum of ideas and positions on slavery at this time. You can be against slavery but recognize that the Constitution defends it, as for example, Lincoln. Or you can be entirely opposed to slavery on moral grounds, as would be William Seward or the more radical abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison, for example. You could also view slavery as, you could also worry about slavery in the territories, which is really the big issue. And there, you could be like Stephen Douglas and believe that each territory has a right to decide, or you could be like Lincoln, who believes that the Congress has the right to decide to prohibit slavery in the territories. Or you could be like the Supreme Court, who in 1854, the Dred Scott decision, decides that slavery is property, and so nobody has a right to ban slavery anywhere. There's lots of views, is what I'm simply saying. It's not black and white, slavery bad or good. Okay, and internal improvements, this is another idea that would be much more obviously Federalist. What we're talking about here is infrastructure, building roads and such. The Whigs are very comfortable with an active government that really promotes the development of industry. The Jacksonians, on the other hand, are quite different. They see their goal as protecting the weak from the powerful. Right? So they worry about small farmers and their exposure to new risks in the new capitalist system, for example. They hate banks. They hate cities. Well, I shouldn't say they hate cities, but they take the side of the wage earners, the burden bearers, is in Jackson's terms. In terms of Protestantism, they take a private view of morality. They don't think that, they don't really care. They don't care much about religion. They think it's up to the individual. And so that, of course, makes Catholics very welcome in the Democratic Party. And, of course, states' rights, which in a way are anathema to the internal improvements because it's up to the states to decide on their infrastructure and taxation policies. So Jackson's win, you say, really does change things. This is a painting from the 60s, but in the 1960s, not the 1860s. But it really does capture much. There's documentary evidence that suggests that this is really true, that when Jackson won, there really was a mob that tracked quite a lot of mud into the White House on Inauguration Day, and some people were quite horrified. The point thing that Jackson supporters, the Jackson branch of the Democratic Republican Party, which henceforth is known as the Democrats, are these little guys. And the Whigs are the bigger people, the bigger guys. The way Daniel Walker Howe, historian, put it, is Whigs are the party of economic diversity but cultural uniformity, whereas the Democrats are the party of economic uniformity but cultural diversity. And I think it's a nice, pithy way of seeing the difference. So it's not, in a large sense, the Whigs have inherited much from the Federalists, but there's differences too, right? And a lot of that is this injection of Protestant values, which the Whigs were not, the original Federalists were not terribly concerned with. Okay, so these then are the political parties in the background. Let's go back now to anti-Catholicism. This is probably a long enough quote that we don't really need to read it. It's from a magazine called The Protestant, and it's published in 1834. And this is an example of what the more highbrow anti-Catholicism. Interestingly, I think Morse kind of fits in here, although Morse is perhaps even more extreme. But it's written for an audience fairly educated sorts. They're not calling for riots and rebellions and expulsions and imprisonment or anything like that. They're really talking. They simply believe that that Catholics are a threat to the democracy because they're going to do what their priests tell them. Right? They're essentially monarchists. It's a rehash, in a way, of Jefferson's fear of monarchists that might come over. But this goes on. This highbrow anti-Catholicism continues, but it doesn't really gain a lot. This magazine, well, at least it changes its name pretty soon after. It's not a successful magazine. And the Protestant Organization of New York, which I don't think is actually related to it, but it could be, they sponsor a bunch of meetings where they invite Catholic priests to debate theological points with Protestants, and surprisingly Catholics do come. And that grows into all sorts of debates that are carried out in the newspaper about it. But eventually newspapers start to charge them the advertising rate because it's so boring and nobody really cares. So this is going on. Again, there is this thread through Protestantism of anti-Catholicism at this level, but it's not what's really carrying the day. Riots are what really are carrying the day. This is what gets people interested. And there are several kinds. One kind is a very straight-ahead anti-Catholic riot, such as the Ursuline convent that's at Charlestown, Massachusetts, which was burned in 1834. What happens here is in 1834, this is a new convent, and it's a school. It's actually a school for girls, and a large fraction of the girls who go to the school are not Catholic, but in fact are Protestant. Catholics are poor, and this is a fairly swanky school. But the Protestant girls who go here are Unitarians, and so there's an internal struggle there between Unitarians and the Congregationalists. Congregationalism having recently been disestablished in Massachusetts, the Congregationalists are concerned when other Protestants are seen as in the camp of Catholics. That may or may not have been an important cause of the riot that ensued, but it's background. There's tension within Protestants as well. What triggered the riot was that in July of 1834, Elizabeth Harrison, who was an overworked music teacher and nun, leaves the convent in the night and seeks refuge with a farmer nearby. And she sends word to her brother, I think is in New York. A day or two later, she returns to her senses and returns to the convent, and it's really not a great big deal. But by that time, there's rumors that spread. Rumors that will make a lot of sense to you if you think about the Maria Monk story that we talked about before. Rumors that she was forced to return, that she has been cast into some sort of a dungeon, etc., etc. Naturally, along with all these are the belief that there are exotic sexual practices going on. And so when in fact the rioters break in, the first thing they do is run to the basement and look for the bones of babies, and they don't find any. So that Sunday, Lyman Beecher and other preachers give very, very virulent, particularly virulent anti-Catholic sermons. And I mentioned Lyman Beecher. He's a very interesting case. He wrote something called The Plea for the West, which sometimes I use instead of Morris. It's the same. It has the same tone, but it's much longer and much more repetitive. But he and Morris are of one mind about Catholics, and particularly Beecher is particularly worried about Catholics in the West, by which I mean Missouri. So, but the reason Beecher is important is because his family is sort of a metaphor for this the way that anti-Catholicism and slavery come together in this period. Beecher's daughter is Harriet Beecher Stowe. Anyone know who Harriet Beecher Stowe is? What she might have written? Very good. Pause a second. Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? Oh, good. Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is an abolitionist tract, a very influential, important book in the abolitionist movement. So there you have the sort of two generations. Beecher's very prominent, and as I say, he was preaching fire and brimstone and anti-Catholicism. So the riot happens on a Sunday night, I believe. Essentially, they burn down the convent and look for babies. Dead babies in the basement. They don't find any. The establishment, Boston, condemns the riot, and they call for compensation from the state and so on and so forth. But none of that ever happens, and nobody is ever convicted. But I don't want to give you the impression that the Irish are meek victims of riots. There are a lot of riots in the 1830s and 1840s. The country is extremely tumultuous. For example, in Philadelphia, there are 9 major mob actions against blacks between 1834 and 49. And these are all, the Irish are behind all of these. Philadelphia has, as I mentioned before, a very substantial free black population, as well as a growing Irish population at this time. The Flying Horse Riot is an interesting example. It's one that has been written about by several historians. And I think it's probably typical. What's interesting about it is that two things that are interesting about it. It highlights how blacks and Irish lived very close together and yet far apart. The riot began at Carousel, which Flying Horses get it, which operated in Philadelphia and served both races. It served anyone. It wasn't a segregated Carousel. About 100 white mobsters appeared, and fights broke out. But the riot continued for 3 days, and over time it seemed to become more and more organized. And for example, on the third night, after the rioters had already attacked most of the houses of prosperous blacks in the area, they worked their way into the more slummy areas. And these are areas where Irish and blacks live very much next to each other. There's not this kind of segregation that we used today is not present there. But by method of some signal or another, the rioters burned down the homes of blacks and did not touch the homes of